This meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Okay, folks, good evening to you. Young Jon O'Neill here from Launceston on the other end of the line. This call will be recorded as usual and we'll put into the lads chat when we get it off the cloud tomorrow. I'll just briefly introduce Jon, and then I'll let him go ahead and do a better introduction. But I know Jon from Launceston a long time. He's the son of very good friends of ours. He's and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jon, you're the head pastor at the Tail Race Church in at Riverside.
Yep.
And as well as that, he's also a very accomplished footballer, soccer player, and he has rejected me that many times. I tried to get him across to the enemy, across the road from him, but he wouldn't come. But that sort of tells you the sort of lad that he is. And I have a lot of time for young Jon. I'm delighted that you can join us tonight. So, Jonathan O'Neill, I will leave you to it. The subject is Enneagram. I will use a term like it's a personality test, or like a disc profile for people that want some sort of a comparative program. Jon, how far off the mark was I? And I will let you introduce yourself formally.
Sure. Thanks, Vic. No, pretty close. Like, that's how I view it. That's how I sort of see it. I think of it as being like a tool to help us understand ourselves better and others better. That's spot on as far as I'm concerned. And then as far as a little bit about me, I think you painted a pretty good picture, but to give it a little bit of extra detail just to help it all make sense and help connect some of the points later on, I suppose. So I went to uni. I thought I wanted to become a physio, always interested in sport and health and wellbeing. I did my undergrad, so my bachelor's in health science, health promotion. And before I went and did my master's, I sort of stumbled into youth work. So the next couple of years, I bounced around the north of the state, helping young people that were disengaged, like severely disengaged from education and training and employment. Talking about people that had their parents murdered, to being abandoned, to just everyday ordinary kids. And then my wife and I moved to Adelaide for a little while, and I worked in health there. And then we moved to Hobart, and I worked in the prison there doing sport and health and wellbeing and those types of programs. And it was whilst I was there at the prison that I ended up bumping into a bunch of the young men that I used to work with as a youth worker a decade earlier. And like, I love my time there, but it was then that I sort of had a bit of a penny drop moment, and I realized that I wanted to spend most of my energy on the other side of the fence, helping people become really healthy so that they never end up in a horrid place. So that's when I came back here, started working for the church, but we also do this thing called Judes, which is a bunch of youth work that we do in the local community. So from school programs to sporting clubs to everything else in between. That's a little bit more about me there, Mick. I hope that's helpful too. And yes, the primary way that I sort of knew you was playing soccer against you. They're fantastic footballers. So I'm glad to hear them having a bit of a kick.
No, it was all good fun at the time. Just what could have been, Jon? What could have been? We could have won everything.
maybe I should have signed the deal. Maybe I should have.
Okay, so
this Enneagram, is that what you want to do?
Yes, please. The launch into it, young Jon.
So Enneagram, it's sort of been around for a fairly long time, but the ideas go back much longer. And it's just like how Mick described it. It's like this personality profile. So there's sort of 9 numbers. And if you've seen what it looks like, it's sort of almost looks like a star with a circle around it, which can be a little bit off-putting if you're not used to it. But there's a lot of depth to it, a lot of depth. So within each of those 9 sort of personality profiles or categories or buckets, if you will, there's sort of 3 subtypes buried within each one. And then you can sort of cluster in groups of 3, like the different numbers around the 9, and into like a heart triad and like a head triad and an action triad. So there's sort of different ways there. And then it really provides some depth in that once you have your central number, or the one that you're most closely aligned with, you sort of lean into the ones on either side of you a little bit from time to time. And we call these your wings or your neighboring numbers. And then in periods of stress or real relaxation, often if you've seen it, there's like these lines that sort of intersect across the star. These are called your stretch and release points. So it's really interesting because when I think about myself and when I go to those periods of high stress, high anxiousness, often I slip into a pattern of behavior that's different to what I normally behave. And I find this tool, Enneagram, gives a language and a map for what I've just flipped into, which I find really, really useful. So I say all this to say that I find that this tool to be really beneficial and really helpful. And I think it's really connected to well-being and mental health and thriving. A lot of the research sort of shows that when we try to paint a picture of success, whether it's corporate success or team leadership success or just health and well-being and balance, one of the most predictive factors of that is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I find that that's incredibly encouraging because if it's some other skill set or character trait that I don't possess, that feels quite debilitating. But the good thing about it being self-awareness is that that's something that we can all lean into and grow into constantly.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love about you, Mick, to be totally frank with you. I think that you are incredibly healthy and balanced. And I think that you've learned a lot about yourself over the years. And so I'm thrilled that we get to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, if I didn't keep putting myself into some strange situations, John, it probably wouldn't have been as harsh. But thank you nonetheless for that. I appreciate that.
That's fine. So, and the other good part I should mention about the Enneagram that I like is that it doesn't just describe my strengths. Like it helps me describe sort of whether you want to call it a shadow side or a dark side or my weakness. And I think that that's really important when we talk about becoming a more mature, more functional self or a healthier self, because we need to have a language and a map around our dysfunctional patterns, because otherwise everything can become very dark very quickly. And having a map for that for both myself, but also to be able to understand others with is really helpful when I'm thinking of leading teams or creating environments in which other people can then also thrive. So what we go over tonight, I'll give like a little bit of an introduction to each of the Enneagram numbers, and then perhaps someone that's viewing this call later might be able to, they might go, oh, that could well be me.
Yes.
Yes. But I'm not going to go into like any real depth because one, I'm not like an Enneagram coach, but I'm just going to give you the language that we use in our workplace, like on a daily basis, because that's really practical and really usable, I find.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what you are by any chance? Like, have you ever spent any time with it?
I have done it.
Can't remember.
I have forgotten. That was.
That's so good.
I don't know, but I know Cara has done it. My daughter, and you know Cara, and Celine's done it.
So good.
Yeah. So I just can't quite recall where I was.
All good.
Normally, sort of central of everything and reasonably balanced, unless Leeds, lose or something. Other than that, I'm okay.
All right. All good. All right. Well, the first one, so just numbered through, and then they've got a little nickname next to them. So the first one is called the reformer or the perfectionist. Yeah. And this happens to be what my wife is, so I sort of know this one fairly well. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I could probably describe all the bad traits of a type 1, to be honest with you. But so this is the kind of person that is incredibly hardworking, incredibly diligent, and they have a real eye for details, and they want to get everything just right. And they're really fixated on wanting to control things to make sure it's right. Like you hear it constantly. Oh, that's not right. And that's the key word. And so one of the ways that you can lose a one, so when I'm thinking about team dynamics at work, one of the ways that I can lose confidence with a one is if they see me cutting a corner, right? Yes. We'll get to my number in a little while, and you'll see that it's a real temptation for me to be able to pursue the ultimate goal. I'm okay with cutting a corner or two, but these type ones, for them, that is just like so out of bounds. So for them, they've got this inner critic, this really loud inner critic. We've all got an inner critic inside of us, which is constantly nagging at us and gnawing away at us, saying, that's not good enough. Come on, you're so useless. Do you know what I mean? It's really negative, bad self-talk. Yes. And for a type 1, their inner critic is so much louder than what it is for some of these other numbers. And so whilst we or I might perceive them as being constantly negative or pessimistic or critical, I'm only catching a little glimpse of what's really going on between the ears for them. Yes. So when I'm thinking of a team dynamic, it's really helpful for me to remind myself of that so that I can cut my wife some slack or cut some of the other type 1s in the work environment some slack. Otherwise, I just come down so hard on them, and they've already got such a harsh voice on the inside for them.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So at their very best, they are serene, they are peaceful, okay? Yeah. And at their very worst, they are angry and they are resentful. So that's the type 1. So the next one's the type 2, and this is the helper. And they've got like this superpower where they're able to sort of somehow survey the room or survey the person in front of them and just understand what the need is, and then they've just got this ability to just slip seamlessly in and just fix it before anyone even notices that there's a problem. So
Yeah.
you notice that the room around me kind of looks a little bit whitewashed because I'm at the Taro Centre. It's a hospitality venue. A
Yeah.
couple of our key staff are this number, and it's like their superpower because they can walk in and there can be someone setting up to do a day conference, and they just sense, oh, you haven't had your morning coffee, or that you're
Yes.
really anxious about this guest that's coming in, or this technical
Yes.
issue, or
Yeah.
something like this. So for them, their, I suppose, shadow side is that they can easily slip too far into wanting to feel needed by others, and they can become a bit of a martyr type figure. So that's something that they've got to be really careful of to make sure that they don't fall into. And so at their worst, they can be really proud. They can be really prideful about just how good that they are. But at their best, they're really humble, and they're
Yeah.
really peaceful with all that they're doing around them. So, Mick, my mum is a type 2, so if that helps you to
No.
the thesis.
Understood. Understood.
All right, so the next one's a type 3. Is this a good pace, by the way, Mick, or do you want to?
This is perfect pace, John.
Okay.
I'm able just to get some stuff down on the way through, and I'll come back and there might be a question or two in there as we move forward.
Yeah, please just interrupt me at any stage with questions.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Love to do that. Makes it a little bit more interesting for people later on anyway.
Yeah.
So type 3, this is the achiever, and this happens to be the number that I most identify with. So these are people that love to be productive. They love to just sort of churn out the work, whether it's at home or at work or at the footy club or wherever they might be. And so for them, their superpower is that they can almost become a bit of a chameleon, if you will, be able to sort of put on the face or put on the image in front of the person in front of that's before them in order to get the result they're after. So in some ways, I sort of think of a real estate agent, if you will. Like they present this polished image, or they'll quickly pick up on the desire of the client in front of them in order to get the outcome. And in that picture of the real estate agent, they can either do that in a really healthy way or in a really manipulative way. And so that's, for me, is a picture of a type 3 at their best and at their worst.
Yeah.
So at their worst for a type 3, they are really deceitful, not just towards others, but also towards self, because their ambition or the ego gets in the way. And so they no longer see others, or they no longer even see themselves, because all that they see is the goal or the objective. And so at best is when they're being truthful and when they're being authentic. And so you can sort of see how, for me, is the type 3 that wants to achieve and wants to win the day and wants to compete and wants to, soccer field, wants to make sure I always leave the field having won type thing, or in the business world or whatever. That in a 1, like, she helps me stay on the straight and narrow. Yeah, absolutely. It makes me a better person because of that. But I find that having that language and that self-awareness, it means that I can come into work and I can check the ego at the door, if you will, and make sure that my motives are pure, so I'm not deceiving myself and I'm not deceiving others, and that before abusing or manipulating others. Really, really helpful.
Well, that's an excellent point, John, because one of the things that really should be happening is people should be just leaving ego at the door and get in and get emotional. Otherwise, it just becomes problematic, and small things then blow out the big things if it's not managed well.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. That's good. Type 4 is the individualist. So this one is a really interesting number. I don't know this number as well. And so for these people, they are a really high, like a disproportionate high percentage of people in the creative industries, in the artistic industries. And that's a number that's perhaps less represented amongst the wider population. And so for these numbers, sometimes they can come across as melancholic or sad, if you will, at times. Not all the time. Like, obviously, they can experience great joy and can be happy. But we're just talking macro trends here. The thing about a type 4 or the individualist is that they're on a constant search for identity, and they're on a constant search to feel special. And it's that pursuit of that which often creates that great art and that magic, if you will, in the world. But it's also that which can also, on the flip side, create some of that melancholy and that introspection and that inner questioning.
Yeah.
At their worst, they are envious, and they really bite into that envy, and it becomes that poisonous chalice, if you will. But at their very best, they've got this beautiful emotional balance where they're able to talk about the depth of life, if you will, or the richness of life in a really healthy and pragmatic way.
Yeah. So interestingly, you may or may not, but Carol's husband Stephen is a chef, and I assume you mean creative being in all its forms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So chefing being one of those where, and you would see this at the tail race, of course, with the chefs that have been and come and gone. So and Stephen does have a beautiful ability to his emotional intelligence is quite high, and he can be very emotive and emotional when he's talking, and full of love. Essentially, is what the is, you know. So
So that's a great point. So the way to lose a 4, like if I'm running a kitchen and if my chef's a 4, the way to lose a 4 is to not remind them of their worth, like relationally. If I skip over that step in the morning greeting or on the weekly rhythms, if I forget to remind them that I find them really worthwhile and really valuable and that they have a special place in my life, that's how I lose a 4 in the long run.
Yeah.
The next one's number 5, which is the investigator. And so for this one, this is like my brother-in-law. And when my brother-in-law, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? He's sort of like, well, he's amazing. But the way I think about him and this number of the other people that I know that are this category, sometimes they can be emotionally not distant, but they're not as reciprocal emotionally. It can be a little bit more head-based. And they've got this incredible ability just to store information and just to categorize a bunch of information in their brain. Like I was talking to my brother-in-law, Caleb, recently. I'm like, oh, what podcast have you been listening to lately? And he said, oh, one on Persian rugs. I'm like, what?
Okay.
Who wants to do a podcast about Persian rugs? But for him, it was curiosity, and he's storing this information constantly in his brain. And in the workplace environment, he's got this superpower where these 5s are able, because they store all this information, they ask all these questions, they're this investigator type figure, they are incredible problem solvers. Like they come at things where we've got like a log jam and we just can't see our way through an issue on the profit and loss or in HR or whatever.
Yes.
A couple of days, and they come back with this just magical solution. So at their best, a type 5 is engaged, and at their worst, they're just engaged and floating away, just in la la land. And the way you lose a 5 is if you put pressure on them emotionally to engage. And so if I ask constantly, oh, how's the home life, or how are you really doing, or tell me how you really feel. For him, for these people, they don't find that appetizing, or they don't find that to be a warm relational connection. If I ask him about his hobbies or his interests or his podcasts on Persian rugs, that's the gateway towards emotional connection.
That's a great point, John. Actually, the intrusiveness or the inquisitiveness that is probably well meant but misplaced. You certainly could lose people like that for sure.
Yeah, totally. And then the next one's number 6. This is called the loyalist. And these are the people that honestly are just salt of the earth and make the world just such a better place. They are loyal, fiercely loyal. They are compassionate. They are kind. They are enthusiastic. They're all these types of things. But they're also the kind of person that makes sure that we have done the risk assessment. If you will. That we're navigating the risk appropriately. So as that we don't hurt ourselves and we don't hurt others.
Yes.
So they're really important in an organization point of view or in a family point of view or whatever context they're in. So I think sometimes we can think that their profile is not as sexy or something like this.
Yes.
But they are just genuinely good people, and without them, our organizations and our sporting clubs are weaker places. So for them, At their best, they are courageous, so they're not paralyzed by that desire to manage risk. And at their worst, they're just fearful and they're anxious. So for me, as I'm leading teams and these types of things, the way that I lose a 6 is if I'm not honest with them.
Yeah.
So if they smell dishonesty or the fact that I'm being disingenuous, it's just an absolute relationship killer for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm better off sharing with them bad news
Yes.
at the risk of triggering anxiousness than
Yes.
what I am about fudging the numbers or saying that we're off to a different destination.
Yes. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I find that just to sort of before we do these last 3 numbers, it's probably a good point to remind ourselves that the Enneagram and the personality tools really important for us to become our best self, and our healthiest self. Through having this language and this map, it's not just about curiosity, but if it becomes a part of our daily practice and daily language, it really does help me avoid those dysfunctional patterns, or at least try to work on them so that I can be a healthier version of self. And that's really important.
Absolutely.
So the next one's the 7. This is called the enthusiast. So these are the people that love spontaneity. They love a good time. They've got high energy, and they hate monotony.
Wow, you've just described Celine.
I think she could be this one, or she could actually be the next one. I'm not sure.
Well,
I suppose.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. So the way you lose a 7, is if you ask them to do something monotonous. If you ask them to do the same thing day in, day out, because what they are really fearful of and what they hate more than anything else is a sense of feeling trapped. They never want to feel trapped. So the spark of life, they bring big energy into whatever room that they walk into. They've got energy to go and create and do things, but they just don't want to have to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Okay.
So at their worst, they are gluttonous. And I don't mean that just in the food sense. I just mean that in I've got to consume all of life all at once type of sense.
Yeah.
I've got to have all the holidays today. I've got to have all the cars, all the motorbikes. I've got to have all the whiskey. I've got to have all the, I know, right? And then at their best, we use the word sober here. And it's not, again, just in the alcohol sort of sense, but it's in the sense of I'm okay with what I have today. I'm okay with, I don't need to chase another high today. It'll be a relational high or something else. Like I'm in a healthy space there.
Very good.
Then the next one, the number 8, this is called the challenger. So again, these ones have huge energy. They get a lot done. They are strong-willed. They are competitive. Whenever they sense even just a sniff of injustice, they go into combat mode and they advocate for the weak or the marginal. They are people would in Tasmania. He would be aware of my friend Will Smith from JCP. So he'd be a classic type art.
Absolutely, terrific lad.
Yeah, fantastic lad.
Yeah.
So at their best, these people that protect innocence, if you will, like they protect goodness, and at their worst, their forcefulness is overpowering to other people. Something that's interesting about a type 8 is that at times they can't tell the difference between in intimacy between love and conflict because both of them elicit such a strong emotional reaction within that sometimes they can feel and look like the same thing. So in a team dynamic, they can be terrific leaders, but you just have to manage them, or if you are an 8, you have to manage that forcefulness so you don't crush the other types that are in the room. Yeah. Which then brings us to, I just made a note here about a couple of these numbers. So one last thing about the type 8. The way to lose the type 8 is if you waffle or are indecisive around them. Like they want to constantly be in motion. So if they feel like you are the thing that's pulling the handbrake on them, it's one way to lose them for sure. Which brings us to the last one, which is the 9 or the peacemaker. there are quite a lot of 9s in the world around me. I've told our team that we're not allowed to hire any more 9s because we've got too many.
Yeah.
These are often called like the sweethearts of the Enneagram.
Okay.
And a job that it might help people picture them. Not that everyone is defined for certain jobs, but it would be like a receptionist. Like you walk into a hotel lobby and there's a receptionist on, and they're sweet. They're peaceful. They're immediately able to connect emotionally with you. They're able to sort of intuitively know what your needs are, and they're able to find a way to sort of meet some of those needs. They've got this ability to bring harmony wherever they go, is what I'm trying to describe. Like they bring harmony. They're trying to avoid conflict, and they're trying to bring harmony and equilibrium everywhere they go. So every environment feels safe, feels healthy, feels joyful. That's sort of the motivation and the objective, or the internal motivation of a 9. And the difficulty is that because they're so tuned to hearing every other voice in the room, like in a team meeting, oh, I hear your point of view. I hear your point of view. Yeah, no, that's a great point of view. Sometimes they find it very, very hard to hear their own point of view.
Yeah.
Like, it's very difficult to discern what that is at times. And so for a 9 on the pathway to maturity, it's about continuing to have that superpower of hearing others, but also being able to hear their own as well. They can be paralyzed by indecision. Because there's a fear of as soon as something's put into action, perhaps that's going to create disharmony somewhere.
Yeah.
And so there can be a real sort of paralysis that can occur there.
Yeah.
At their best, they can be action-oriented, but at their worst, they are slothful or disengaged. So the way you lose a 9 is if you make a decision too quickly. And so they feel like not everyone's been heard in the room. So what happens in a scenario that's like that is we will have a meeting, come to a decision. Everyone has buy-in as far as I'm concerned. I'm a 3. Like, come on, let's move it, faster pace.
Yeah.
Let's go. And then you get 3 weeks down the road and you realize that everything's stalled and everything's broken and it hasn't happened. And you go, well, why is that? And you've come to find out that the 9 that was in the room, they pulled the handbrake on it.
Yeah.
So in action their part. And you're like, well, why didn't you? We had a conversation about it. The conversation was too fast so that they weren't able to find their voice, let alone give their voice.
Yes.
That's a mistake that I have to then learn.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's sort of like a quick overview of the 9 different types of the Enneagram. Mick, what do you think?
No, look, I will say this, John. When Sharon, your mum, put say an eye onto it, I was saying, oh God, not another bloody disc thing. But I will say this: I really did enjoy doing the Enneagram. I genuinely can't recall. It might have been a loyalist, or it might have been somewhere in that loyalist peacemaker bubble. Which I have no issues with, because after 61 years on the planet, you get to know yourself a bit better. And I think there's comfort in the fact that potentially there's probably bits of all of them in us somewhere stored up.
Yeah.
Just haven't quite been led to that point for whatever means on your journey so far. So I don't think all is lost. If you're something and you're just not sure you want to be over there, I don't think all is lost. I think there's people's ability to adapt and grow and learn and take on other roles. I do like the peacemaker one, though, other than the getting paralyzed and disengaged and putting handbrakes on. But for me, I do like to find a certain information. I don't want to spend all year doing stuff, but I would like to hear enough information that you make a balanced decision on things, but certainly don't want to be the handbrake. Now, John, with the likes of this gear, the Enneagram, is this a thing that corporations or businesses use as a pre-entry for new hires? Is there a version of those sort of things? I mean, that would then give corporations a quick look behind the ears, so to speak, at who they're actually taking on. Is that something that you see happening, or is it happening previously? Or
good question. I think there's a tension there. I think there's a desire in one element to use it as part of the intake process, but I think there's also a danger to it as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in terms of our organizations doing it, I think certainly, especially in the United States, I certainly think some organizations would be doing it.
Yeah.
On a lot of the corporate or business podcasts that you might listen to, you'll often hear them refer to a tool such as this.
Yes.
But I would be I'd be very cautious about using it too forcefully as a hiring tool. I think when we're healthy, when we're really healthy, balanced picture, mature is probably a good word that we can insert in the conversation here. When we're a really mature version of ourselves, we end up looking a little bit more like a balanced version of several of them, as opposed to just an extreme version of one of them, which I think is what you were saying 2 minutes ago. And the other thing that I probably mentioned here is that the Enneagram isn't a tool that's appropriate for someone at the other end of the health spectrum. So we're talking about the business world just there. But in that mental health sort of end stage where you need intervention, where you need a GP or you need a mental health specialist, the Enneagram tool isn't appropriate there. And if you were to if someone were in that stage and they were to do an Enneagram test, they wouldn't get a very accurate result. Like there's too much ill health that's happening that sort of hides who you truly are at that point. Sorry, I don't know what, I just felt like I forgot to say that part earlier. So
no, that's fine. I think I'll just go back to as a sort of reference point. I used to work for Mobil at an oil refinery, early 90s through to 98, 99, something like that. And that you did have to sit an early 90s version of this thing back in the day, but it was all designed to see could you cope with the physical and mental stress of doing long shifts, mental shifts, what drove you, regular money, high money, all those weird sort of questions. So it was quite a involved process at that point in time. So I was curious to see how it evolved to something different. But I like your point about the fact that it wouldn't be for everybody, and I think it'd be on. We certainly Juice Plus wouldn't be using it as an example, but certainly you'd expect it to be unfair for people who come in who have a certain skill type, and then to be knocked with some of this. Now I'm sure there would be some roles where this would be appropriate, but I'd say for the most of the time it wouldn't be. We could do without it and maybe do it as a bit of a training field at a point in time without leaning on it terribly heavily. One of the other things, of course, John, is that in today's world, in 2025, looking after one another, looking after yourselves in particular, looking after men's health, and you can take that any way, like it would be physical, mental, spiritual, financial, whatever it might be. It's more important now than it's ever been. And I think Enneagram or versions like it, where you can find the best version of yourself, but also maybe discover some of the shadow bits where you might need to do some work on that, or at least be conscious of it, what might trigger it, what it might be, where you might see it. I think those sort of things are invaluable. It's with the AFL world, if you're an AFL follower, and you may or may not be, some of the lads watching this eventually, has been hit with 2 traumatic events the last 3 months to the same family, and if that doesn't energize you to go and have a quick think where you're at, I think it's a valuable tool nowadays, a valuable lesson, just to give yourselves 5 minutes, catch your breath, and then just gather everything around your head and see where it finishes up. Yeah,
very well said, mate. Totally agree.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of weeks for a lot of people, but
hard.
Yeah, it has been. This is obviously, this is used, John, as a tool supplied by Sharon and the Tail Race. I wasn't sure, actually, the questions dropped out of my head, so I apologize for that.
Right. There's a bunch of resources that people can find online anyway. Like there's dozens of books, there's dozens of podcasts, there's free quizzes that you can do, or there's paid ones that you can do that come with a big report. It's even interesting sort of giving a quick Google of like some of the famous people that were certain profiles, because what you quickly realize is that they've been huge. Some of the most successful US presidents have been type 9s. You know what I mean? Like they're not all necessarily the challenger, or they're not all the name whatever other number you want to pick. Like they're hugely
Yes.
successful people across all these different things. And so I think that helped us to have a more honoring view of others and also of self. Like it's
Yes.
incredibly dignifying, I suppose, as opposed to having a very narrow or aesthetic view of what success might look like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. Very well done. Well, Jon, thank you for that. I know this was a short version of it, but you have described that very, very well. Fellows, I would certainly encourage you to, as Jon said, Google Enneagram and have a quick look at it and big scout around it. And any questions, please come back to me in the lads group. And if there's any more info required around Enneagram, I can certainly put you in touch with the right people. You may have done it before, you've done disc profiles and that sort of things. This is certainly well worth the effort and the time. And Jon, again, thanks very much for jumping on.
Great job.
Really appreciate your time, pal. And as you know, a lot of time for you. And you did a great job. Doing a great job at the tail race. The continuation of your mum and dad. Doing a super job there. And again, thanks very much, pal. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mick.
And I'm just going to stop the recording now, boys, and you can see it tomorrow.